Hi folks, it's Switchback. I wanted to go over with you the gear that I used on my most recent snowshoeing trip, which is also my first snowshoeing trip, and how everything performed. I'm going to put links down in the description below of everything, and everything in this video I purchased myself except for the very first item, but I promise I'm going to give honest reviews of everything. The first one is my Get Out Gear puffy blanket, and even if I have my quilt, I like to have this. If I'm laying in my quilt, I'll put it over my arms so that my arms are outside the quilt, but these are inside, and it keeps my arms nice and toasty. It didn't really get cold enough to use it on top of my quilt, thankfully, but I'm really glad that I did bring it. And historically, when I've taken it elsewhere, it's been really handy. I can snap it like a poncho, and I love it. I took 2 sleeping pads with me. One of them was my Thermarest Ridge Rest Solite closed cell foam pad. I don't typically take this, but it was really nice to have. It's a good idea to put one of those underneath your inflatable sleeping pad, and it's also a great thing to sit on. I put my backpack on it. It's really, really handy and versatile, and it doesn't absorb water, which is nice. My inflatable sleeping pad was my Neo Air X Lite from Thermarest. I really enjoy this pad, but I do wish I had something a little wider, and one of the reasons I do like it is because it has a 5.4 R value, which means it's highly insulated, which is of course very important when you're in the snow. And with the Ridge Rest, that gave it an extra 2, so I had a 7.4 R value, which is pretty awesome. I also took my Thermarest Trekker chair, which goes on my sleeping pad and makes it into a chair. Frankly, I was too exhausted to even bother with it. I thought about setting it up when I was going into my tent for the night, but I was like, I'm not gonna sit up and read, I'm gonna lay down. So I didn't even bother putting it on there. But I had brought it so that I could sit up inside of my tent, which is really nice when it's inclement weather or it's dark at 5 o'clock and you wanna go inside your tent. For my headlamp, I used my Nightcore NU25, not the new ultralight one, but the original one. And even though I didn't store it inside of my quilt, it did a really good job considering how cold the temperatures were. It got down into the teens overnight, and it still worked just fine when I needed to get up and use it. I think the star of the whole show was my UGQ 0 degree Bandit quilt, which kept me nice and toasty. Again, it got down to about 14 overnight outside. It was 18 inside of my quilt or inside of my tent. It did get down to 10 degrees after I'd already gotten up, but this thing did an amazing job. I used the tensioning system, and I had it, I used the straps to put it on my sleeping pad, and it was amazing. Hi, mosquito. You probably already know that I love my pea style, and I am so glad I had this. And I intentionally chose clothing that would work to use said pea style in the middle of the night, having to get up to go pee, or even on the trail with my snowshoes on. It was really nice not to have to drop trow. I used that with my Kula cloth, which actually of course froze because it was so cold, but it still worked absolutely wonderfully. I did wish that I had a pea jar, which I actually have no experience using yet, but I think that in my one-person tent it might have been more cumbersome to use than just getting up, but I can definitely see the merit of having one. Right before this trip, I purchased an MSR Whisperlight stove, which was awesome, and I have no regrets about getting it, but I do wish I'd had a little bit more practice with it beforehand. It performed really well, and even over the couple of times that I used it on the trip, I got better at it, but I still need to get used to gauging how much fuel to use. I was really glad that I took my Aquamira drops as a backup for water treatment, because I did, again, run out of fuel. I was able to melt enough water for drinking, but I was not able to boil it to make it safe. And fresh Sierra snow, probably fine, but not really a risk that I am personally willing to take. And if you're getting some value out of this, be sure to like it and hit that subscribe button. You may already know how much I love my X-Mid tents, and I decided to go with my one-person tent because I wanted to keep it warmer. You know, a larger space requires more work to keep it warm, but I really would have appreciated the space of the 2-person. Now that said, I also would have had to track out that much more space, which if you watch my trip report, you'll see how exhausting that was. I also think that the solid inner would have been nice to have, so that just means I need to go spend some more money on that. I think that that would have made a bigger difference in the warmth than having the full mesh, even with the 1-person versus the 2-person. I might go with a 2-person solid inner if I'm going to be doing more snow camping. To stake out the tent, I used REI snow stakes, and they did really well. I'm pretty happy with them. And I didn't have to chisel them out in the morning, but again, this was also not like super wet snow that froze overnight. It was really fluffy snow. But even in the fluffy snow, the only time that they popped out was 100% user error. The trekking poles that I use are Lucky Cressida with the snow baskets, and these were, oh my God, like I would have fallen so many more times had I not taken them. They did amazing, including supporting my weight plus my backpack with the snow and everything. They performed really well. I also used them upside down, well, right side up basically. When you set up an X mid, it's usually tips up, but I put them handle up with my tent and then had them in the snow with the snow baskets on, which worked out really well until I kept hitting the one and I ended up having to flip it over and take off the snow basket. But otherwise they did really well with that as well. The snowshoes I used are the TSL Symbiose Elite, and I have a large because of my weight. And they did really well. They were very comfortable and light to use with my Oboz Bridger boots. I don't recommend them with the Merrell Moabs, which is what I wore them with before. And my Achilles were really unhappy about that. I like that these are flexible. I like that they have a heel lift. They have really good crampons on the bottoms of them. They're not as heavy as some. They're also not as light as some, but they do a really good job. I've been very happy with them so far. I use Kula sunscreen on my face. It's really light and it smells decent, but it doesn't feel like cakey. And my skin is really sensitive. I break out very easily. Been very happy with that. And when you're in the snow, make sure that you get the underside of your nose, which is where I got the worst sunburn of my life when I was in high school, and the underside of your chin, because that snow reflects that sun right back at you. I took my pink Hydro Flask mug, which normally I love, and maybe if I had kept it in my foot box, it might have been useful, but it was out. I left it out overnight, and so it would have made my coffee cold had I been able to make coffee, except for that I ran out of fuel. But looking at my mug and it being frosted over in the morning, and I was like, wait, it's like pre-chilled. So maybe coffee isn't going to be the best thing in there. I probably would have been better off taking my usual Sea to Summit insulated mug that's plastic. It's a good idea to take a shovel when you go in the snow like this. I took the Snow Claw shovel and it was okay. It was a nice place to sit, but I think I would have liked something with a handle more, especially with, again, how deep and fluffy the snow was, to really level out where I was setting up my tent, for creating a spot to sit, all the jobs that needed to be done. I will say that I liked how easily it fit in the back pocket of my backpack. Said backpack was the REI Flash 55 liter, and it performed amazingly, and I was surprised that I actually didn't even have to use that much space in it. The back mesh pocket really just had the shovel in it and this fleece in it, and that was it. It did really well for snowshoeing for a winter load. I mean, again, overnight trip, not crazy, but I was glad that I had that. I used my Frontiersman bear canister, which is now the UDAP no-fed bear, but this was really nice to open in the cold versus like my Bear Vault. It even fit my 1100 milliliter Tokes pot, which I was impressed with, and even with all of my too much food. Ooh, it will. Ooh, nice. Normally I use a ThermoWorks ThermoDrop thermometer, which just hangs off of my pack and it stays on all the time during my trips. I didn't realize that the battery had died, so I wasn't able to use that. Instead, I used my Kestrel 5000, which only stays on for about 5 minutes at a time, and therefore goes through a lot more battery. But I have a lot to learn with this thing, but it can pair with my phone, which I really like, and I can monitor the wind. And before I give that one a full review, I will be getting a lot more experience with it. It was a treat purchase before this trip. And if you want to support this channel, I do have a Patreon and I'll link that below. And I really hope that you got some value out of this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.